Welcome to Office Events Checklist. As you know, checklists can be very helpful to confirm that everything that's supposed to be done actually is done and who completed the tasks. Within Atom, our checklist is located in the Office Events section. It's the third column over and it has a check icon. As you notice in this example, the checklist icon is highlighted orange, and what that means is there's a required checklist item. And I'm going to show you the checklist page here. I left click on the icon, sends me to the account event checklist, and I'm in the task type, I'm in the office event in review. So I'm actually going to review a tax return. So these are the items I believe are necessary or important to be done when completing a review process for a tax return. So verify W-2s, verify 1099s, verify other tax documents, home heating credit, make sure we have due diligence checklist completed, verify fee and payment, signature documents, and then verify the tax return was uploaded properly. So as you see, there's some items that have a red asterisk next to them. That means that they're required. And if they're not checked off, there'll be red flags popping up saying you can't move this to the next status unless the required checklist items are completed. The other items, they're important, but they're not required. So, and these are all set, this is all set up in admin under event status checklist, which is covered in the admin setup, how to create your checklist items. So for in review, if I'm doing a tax return, verifying everything, as I complete it, I will check the items off. I could check them all off at one time by checking this master checkbox here and then selecting save, or I can do them one at a time. So if I do them one at a time, as I complete checklist item, I'm going to leave the very last one unchecked so I can show you what happens when we try to move it to another status. Then I'm going to select save. As you see, it'll show when it was completed, whom it was completed by, modified by, and the amount of time. If I want to assign, say I want to make a note, say if Drake verifying the W-2s, I select the edit icon, I can stamp date it and say hard to read one of the W-2s from Myers. So that would be the reviewer doing that. Now, if you want to assign this to somebody, you could also assign it to a user, and then that would show up in their assigned tasks. You can set up a due date also. I'm going to save this. So now the reviewer is kind of covering themselves. So if something were to happen, they find out the W-2 was entered incorrectly, they have a note here that, well, it was hard to read the W-2, so it was hard to tell what was correct and what wasn't. So this is how the checklist page would work. All right, I'm going to go from here. Also, I can look at other checklist items. So maybe I want to go to the lobby and see if everything was completed at that point. Select the lobby. In this case, the checklist items when the client walks through the door is we want to scan their IDs in, hand them our client info sheets, ask them if they own or if they're renting, and it looks like they were all completed, and this is when they were completed and who completed them. So I could look at one individual checklist page, or I could look at all of them. If I select all, I'm going to see everything display. So you can make sure if the review process is, make sure all the checklist items from other prior statuses were completed, this is how you would do it. And as you can see, there's one item that was not, ask if they provided us all their tax documents. That actually was in under tax preparation. So these are the items and checklist items in tax prep. I want to ask if they provide us with all their income and also with all their tax deductions. So that preparer failed to do that, so you may want to send a note to them and ask them, did you actually ask these questions to the individual and you forgot to check it off, or were they not asked? So anyway, that's how we can use a checklist. So if now when I go back to my file, before I move this to another status, I want to show you how it displays on the home page. So if I go up here to the home page and I go to in review, and there's the checklist icon also, and as you see, it is highlighted in orange, meaning again, there's required checklist that need to be completed. So if I click on the icon, I shoot right back into the page that which we were there, and you see I don't have verified tax return completed yet, and I could go back to the office event, which would send me right back to where I was, or I can go back to the file inside the client file, so wherever you'd like to go. So from here, I'm going to then move it to change the status. And in this case, I want to demonstrate another checklist. And I have something set up under rejects for IRS rejects. So I'm going to move it to IRS rejects, save it. And you see a red message coming up here. The event has open required checklist. To review that checklist, click here. And all that's going to do is take me right back to that checklist screen for in review. And this is the one that was not verified. I'm sorry, that was not checked off. So at that point, either if you want to check it off, you can, or if you don't, then you're just moving it to the next stage without checking off a required checklist item. So it doesn't prevent you from moving it to the next office event, but it does alert you that you are moving it when you haven't checked off a required checklist item. I'm going to go back to my file. Now I'm under rejects. If you see here, there is a checklist icon, but it's not highlighted in orange. So that either means 1, there are no checklist items to complete for the status, or 2, there are no required checklist items to complete. So we're trying to draw your attention. If there's required, then you need to go in and make sure it gets checked off. If it's not required, you can also use a checklist just as nice reminders. So if you have some tax preparers that are rookie preparers that may not remember everything that needs to be asked, you can create a whole list of items that should be asked, under the status tax prep, and so they can feel comfortable not having to have a piece of paper in front of them of everything that needs to be asked. They can just go right to the checklist item, and they can see and make sure that it was actually, they covered everything. So again, Adam is trying to convert you to paperless, so you don't need to have a interview sheets. You can put it in a checklist. So right now I'm going to look at what I have under rejects for my checklist. In this case, I'm saying determine why a return was rejected, which is pretty obvious. We're going to do that. The other item is contact the client. All right, and if you notice, this already has assign it to Mark, and it has an assigned due date of 11/5. So today is the November 3rd. So what this means is if this task, or if this checklist item does not get checked off prior to 11/5, then it's going to actually show up in Mark's assigned task. So Mark may be the office manager, and they want to make sure that they are alerted if a return was rejected and the client has not been contacted 2 days from the time it was actually rejected. Okay, so in our office, we try to contact people immediately. So 2 days is a long period of time to wait to let the client know that the return has been rejected. So if this doesn't get checked off, it'll automatically show up in Mark's assigned task that the client was not contacted. And this was all set up in admin, again, under the setup checklist. You can set this up so you can have any checklist item assigned to a specific person, and you can determine when the date would be, right when it moves into that office event, or so many days after. So I'm going to click back here to File. And if I move this now to another status, say I'm going to change it to, move it back to tax preparation again. Maybe we're going to complete what the problem was, why it rejected. As you notice, it lets me move it, even though those 2 checklist items were not completed, it lets me move it without having any red flags because they were not required checklist items. And that's all I have for office event checklists. Thank you.